Good morning everybody, my name is Alex, and if you follow me on social media then you'll probably be aware of the fact that I recently visited the land of the free and the home of the Bible for the very first time, and after being handed Jesus leaflets on the 4th of July and finding Bible verses on the back of my fries from In-N-Out Burger, I think I finally began to realise why so many Americans and non-Americans alike are under the impression that America is a Christian nation. And so after much thought, I decided to throw together this video discussing that very question. Is America a Christian nation? Now, if you're short of time, the answer is no, so thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. But if you're willing to stick around, I'd like to firstly explain exactly why so many Americans think that America is a Christian nation, and then exactly why it's not. So I hope you're all wearing your history caps. Now, like I say, it is pretty easy to see why so many people are under the misapprehension that America is officially Christian. In God we trust is the nation's national motto. The Pledge of Allegiance contains the line, "One nation under God." President-elects hold their hand on a Bible and conclude their oaths of office with the words, "So help me God," during presidential inaugurations. And these facts do, I admit, seem somewhat indicative of a Christian nation. But if we wish to retain intellectual honesty, then we must consider exactly why each of these things are true. Now, I'm going to brush over this part as quickly as possible because I'm sure that many of you already know of the things that I'm going to be talking about, so here goes. In God we trust has only been the motto of the United States since 1956, and one nation under God has only been in the Pledge of Allegiance since 2 years earlier, with both changes occurring under the whim of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who is considered to only have introduced the changes to distinguish capitalist America from the godless commies with whom America wasn't the greatest of friends at the time. Now, these changes did actually influence some states to follow suit, such as Ohio adopting the motto, "With God all things are possible." But before the disparity of the two systems and the Cold War, the motto of the United States was not "In God we trust," it was "E pluribus unum," out of many, one, signifying the birth of a single nation from the 13 colonies of British America. Now, this was the motto adopted by the founders, you know, the ones who actually wrote the Constitution and defined America and its laws. And you'll notice that in this motto, or rather you won't notice, the mention of any god or gods. Holding your hand on a Bible and invoking God as your witness during a presidential inauguration is not a requirement. It's optional. In fact, to make it a requirement would actually be illegal, thanks to Section 6 of a little document called the Constitution, which states that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Seems pretty secular to me. Now, of course, the current Commander-in-Chief did, in fact, pretend to be a Christian and did, in fact, invoke God during what was unequivocally one of the hugest and most bigly inauguration ceremonies in the history of America, just as most presidents before him did as well. But this says absolutely nothing about the religiosity of the nation over which he presides. If America were to elect a Muslim president in 2020, which it could, nobody would claim this to be evidence in favour of America being a Muslim country, just as the current mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is a Muslim, but nobody thinks that London is an officially Muslim city. Well, okay, some people think that London is a Muslim city, but you see the point that I'm trying to make. So that's what I see to be the most popular contentions cleared up, but what I really want to focus on in this video is the founding of America. It's often stated, often by elected officials, that America was founded on Christianity and Christian values. But is this really the case? Well, I'd like to present to you the best possible evidence that one could hope to gather in defense of this proposition, and then promptly rebut it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are, as I hope you are already aware, the words that constitute the first sentence of the second paragraph of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. Except not really. We'll get to that in a minute. It's very interesting, I promise. But in the meantime, you may notice that the word creator is included here in what is perhaps America's most significant historical document, and therefore you may argue that the rights and liberties protected by the Declaration of Independence are hence predicated on the belief in an all-powerful creator. Now, I can see why you might think this, but hold your horses, there's a few things that you might need to consider. Firstly, the Declaration of Independence does not protect your rights and liberties. It's a statement, not a legislative document. In effect, it was America handing in its notice to Great Britain, effective immediately. It's the Constitution which actually serves this purpose, and within the Constitution you will find absolutely no mention of any kind of creator. In fact, the only times that the Constitution does mention religion at all, including the Bill of Rights, is firstly the section that I mentioned earlier prohibiting religious tests to hold public office, and secondly the oh-so-revered First Amendment, which, as well as protecting your freedom of speech, also states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Again, sounds pretty secular to me. And so, it seems, this creator from the Declaration of Independence didn't quite make the cut when it came to drafting the document that really mattered. But here's the thing, it wouldn't matter even if it did. The acknowledgement of some ambiguous creator is in no way suggestive of Christianity. After all, even in the Declaration of Independence, there's no mention of any specific God, or of Jesus, or of the Bible, or anything that is in any way related to a particular religion. So there you have it, folks. The founding documents and the current supreme document of the United States are at least not Christian and are in fact explicitly secular. However, this of course is not the only line of contention. Oh no, another line of defence often employed by disingenuous elected officials is the supposed religious views of the founders themselves. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, they were all believers, and so America of course is a Christian nation, right? Well, no. The claim isn't particularly accurate to begin with the most obvious error here regarding Thomas Jefferson, who certainly was not a Christian as we would traditionally recognise one. Jefferson didn't believe in the divinity of Christ, and he thought that the authors of the New Testament were, quote, ignorant and unlettered. In fact, he once famously went as far as to take a copy of the Bible and physically cut out all references to and mentions of miracles and the supernatural with a razor. Thomas Jefferson was not a man of the Bible. Also, to clear up an excruciating misconception, it may surprise you to learn that Thomas Jefferson never actually wrote that all men are endowed by their creator in the Declaration of Independence. Seriously. It was actually Congress in editing Jefferson's original script who added in the creator. Thomas Jefferson's original draft, which you can find on the internet, made no mention to a creator at all. Here's another one for you. Before January of 1776, the majority of American protests against Britain were not so much a cry for independence as they were just a fervent request for representation in Westminster or the reversal of unfair legislation. But then, on the 10th of that fateful month, an Englishman by the name of Thomas Paine published a pamphlet called Common Sense, in which he advocated for evolution, and well, it had a bit of an effect. It's often argued that without common sense, the American Revolution would have looked a lot different to how it did, or could perhaps have not happened at all, and so Thomas Paine is widely considered one of the most important and influential of the Founding Fathers. Years later, Paine authored another work titled The Age of Reason, in which he criticised Christianity in the Bible and advocated for the philosophical position of deism. It's worth a read. So no, the Founding Fathers were not as Christian as you may have perhaps first thought. But having said this, I would like to just take a moment to clear up some more popular misconceptions about the Founders, mainly for the sake of helping those who are on my side of the fence on this issue. Christianity is the most perverted system that ever shone on man, said Thomas Jefferson. Except this quote is very misleading. He meant perverted as in twisted, as in warped, thinking that people completely misunderstood the real teachings of Jesus. This is probably why he wrote his own Bible. It's similar to how Islamic apologists will claim that ISIS's interpretation of the Quran is a perversion of Islam, perverted, that is, by the extremists. In fact, if you read the entire quote, which is taken from a letter that Jefferson wrote to his friend Joseph Priestley, you'll find that in the very same sentence he also calls Christianity the most sublime and benevolent system that ever shone on man. Jefferson actually called himself a follower of Christ, and in fact pretty much summed up his position on the whole issue in another letter, this time to Benjamin Rush, saying, "To the corruptions of Christianity I am indeed opposed, but not to the genuine precepts of Jesus himself. I am a Christian in the only sense in which he wished anyone to be, sincerely attached to his doctrines in preference to all others." As a matter of fact, most of the founders probably were religious. Washington often invoked God, and John Adams, in response to Thomas Paine, once called Christianity the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity. But here's a more important quote from Adams. "The government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." The mistake here is that this quote is often misattributed to George Washington, when in fact it was written by Adams in the 1797 Treaty of Tripoli, which was signed under George Washington's presidency. But You may notice something here. John Adams, as we've just seen, was a great admirer of the Christian faith, and yet he acknowledged that it had no influence over the government. And this is the point. Okay, it wouldn't matter if every founder was overtly and devoutly Christian. What matters is the constitution that they wrote. If all of the founders were Christian, in other words, that wouldn't in any way make America Christian. After all, it's not like we revere all of the founders' characteristics. When Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, he owned hundreds of slaves, just as George Washington also utilized unpaid labor. The founders were also prone to duels, and they didn't allow women to vote. In other words, these men should only be iconized for the good work that they did, and their personal religious beliefs never came into it. So even if the founders were all religious, which they weren't, and were perfect role models, which they weren't, it still wouldn't make America a Christian nation. Sorry. But before I go, I'd like to clear one further thing up, and that's a common mistake that people often make, which is conflating atheism with secularism. They're completely different things which focus on completely different fields. To say that America is not Christian, or even not religious, is not to say that it's atheistic by definition. Okay, no intelligent political theorist could possibly advocate for any kind of state restriction on religious belief. People don't choose what they believe anyway. To say that America is secular is just to say that it doesn't have any official religious or irreligious foundation. People often claim that to secularize government would be to set up some kind of communist, anti-religious dictatorship which persecutes believers for their faith, but the almost laughable irony is that this is precisely what the Bill of Rights explicitly prohibits. Anybody who claims that a secular government is intrinsically comparable to anti-religious state policy does not understand secularism. Anybody who claims that such a reality could be possible within the United States doesn't understand the Constitution. In 1929, the Soviet Union introduced legislation which fiercely restricted religious practice. Members of the Russian Orthodox Church, among others, were slaughtered by Stalin's regime in an attempt to eradicate religion, with over 85,000 Orthodox priests being shot dead in 1937 alone. This, claim some, is the effect of the removal of religion from politics, and is so fantastically misleading that it seems to have become one of the most popular arguments from would-be American theocrats who wish to see the Ten Commandments illegally plastered outside of courthouses up and down the country. But the definition of the word secular is literally not connected with religious or spiritual matters. I'd say that the forcible deconversion of thousands of believers is somewhat of a religious or spiritual matter, wouldn't you? The USSR was not secular, and furthermore, it only wanted to eradicate popular religion to replace it with another, Stalinism. What I'm trying to say is that a state that promotes Christianity is not secular. A state that promotes atheism is not secular. A secular nation is one that keeps its nose completely out of religious prescription altogether and advocates for an individual's right to think for themselves. Actually, let me rephrase that. A secular state is one in which Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Even if you cling on to the Declaration of Independence's creator, this still makes America, as John Adams once said, no more a Christian nation than it is a Jewish nation or a Muslim nation. Case closed. I've been Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic. You can find me on social media here. If you like what you see and want to support me on Patreon, it would be much appreciated as always. I'll leave a link in the description. But in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.